I'm Michael Kadish, co-founder and executive director of the Ocean State Climate Alliance, where we care very much about advancing practical measures that lead to making progress on Rhode Island's climate goals. This panel is about something very simple: how clean energy projects actually get built in Rhode Island. Not in theory, not in a white paper, not in a hearing, in the real world. If you're a school facilities director, a municipal official, a business owner, or someone managing infrastructure, the question is usually not whether cleaner or cheaper energy sounds good. It does. The real questions are, where do I start? Who do I call? How do I pay for it? What actually works? Who will work on it? And how do I get a project from idea to execution without it stalling out? That's what this conversation is about. We've got a great group to help answer those questions from different angles: utility programs, workforce development, project development, infrastructure delivery. So our goal for the next hour is to be practical and give you a clearer sense of how these projects happen and what it would take to move them forward. Let's briefly introduce the panel. If everyone could just say where they're from and their name and what they're about. Brett.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Brett Feldman with Rhode Island Energy. I manage all the policy, planning, and evaluation for our energy efficiency programs.
My name is Andrew Cortes. I'm the president and CEO of Building Futures, where we're a community-based nonprofit focused on the registered apprenticeship model.
My name is Nick Nybo. I'm senior legal counsel for Revity Energy. We are a distributed generation solar developer located in Warwick, Rhode Island. We have developed 147 megawatts of solar in the state of Rhode Island to date.
You guys heard this in the last panel, but John Kastrino, I'm a hydrogeologist with Haley and Aldrich. I lead the geothermal practice there, and we have about 35 to 40 systems in operation currently, mainly in New England.
Great. So let's just start with the most simple premise. If a school district, municipality, or business wants to start a clean energy project tomorrow, what's the first call they should make? Let's start with you, Brett.
Hopefully to us. If anyone works with schools in Rhode Island, they probably know Mike Cunningham. He's our school municipality account manager. He's running all over the state all the time, checking in on projects, and certainly, from a project development standpoint, you need to talk to us just for interconnection and permits and all that, but also from a design and hopefully efficiency standpoint, you can include us from the beginning as well, because we have programs to help come over some of those costs of, if you want to go to the next level from kind of the baseline to the higher efficiency, that's what our programs are for, to help cover some of those upfront costs. And also we have a lot of technical assistance. We have a program that we're proud of called the Strategic Energy Management Partnership that we have with a lot of our large customers, as well as actually all the colleges and universities in the state, and also the state itself, where we look more holistically and long term, as opposed to just doing one-off projects, to do longer term planning and figuring out what will work when and how to manage all the financing. So we think that really helps customers put together a strategic plan as well.
That's great. Nick, what would you say?
I agree with Brett. Rhode Island Energy is our first call. You cannot begin to plan, to talk about financing, to talk about permitting until you understand what the existing grid can handle, what can be done to upgrade the grid within the bounds of your financial capabilities, as well as engineering, without hearing from Rhode Island Energy.
Right. And what would you say in terms of geothermal project?
Yeah, so geothermal usually comes a little bit later. Some of these questions you've just heard, they're resolved by this point. But one thing we really advocate for with geothermal is to look at a high-level desktop study first. And part of the reason is drilling, it's really a seller's market. So to pilot test where we collect thermal properties that support a geothermal design, it can easily be $100,000. It's particularly in an urban site where it's challenging to manage the soil and the water that's generated. So we really advocate looking at the practicality of geothermal from a high level, working with a mechanical engineer, costing it out, seeing how much footage you need in the ground to meet your goals before you make the investment in pilot testing and design.
Yeah, whether it's a renewable project, geothermal project, one call I wouldn't want people to neglect is to the president of the Building Trades Council. Skilled labor goes hand in glove with energy efficiency project, deep energy retrofit, to make sure that we have the right folks on deck who are prepared to supply the skilled labor. And people may also want to call Build RI to explore a project labor agreement. Many of the municipalities who are engaging school construction now are doing so under project labor agreements, which create access for their community residents to the great jobs, but it also ensures there's no stoppages, no labor strife, and the projects are delivered on time and on budget.
Thank you. Yeah, that's important. Brett, let me just go back to Rhode Island Energy. So when someone comes to you with a real project idea, where can your team be most useful? And at what point we're saying they should start right at the beginning? So, yeah, how could they be most useful?
Yeah, we do work with retrofit projects as well as new construction, right? So I think it's important to think about both those situations. People might be focused on new construction, but also if you're just doing upgrades to existing buildings, where it's important to get us involved as well and make sure you're taking advantage of our programs and technical assistance. One thing I'll say is that the eligibility requirements do change over time. Everyone used to do lighting; that was the workhorse of these programs. And the good thing is we've transformed the lighting market. Bad thing is we can't incentivize them anymore. So we are trying to find what those new technologies are that we can put through the program to find savings for customers. So we're doing a specific study right now beyond lighting at things like heat pump water heaters, heat recovery, duct insulation, like all the other things that everyone just said, oh, let's just put in lights and we'll be good. But now you got to dig a lot deeper. So it is important to understand what's eligible for our program and how to look at it more comprehensively.
What would you say is the most common mistake people make when they approach Rhode Island Energy?
Maybe not having brought us in early enough, I'd say. Because sometimes it is too late, or they just assume that they're eligible, and we need to make sure we don't want to have too much red tape or anything, but we do need to do our technical analysis, and everything we do is scrutinized by the regulators, so we have to make sure that everything meets the requirements that we need.
So, John, I want to ask you a question. When a school district, a university, or a port authority comes to you to explore geothermal, what does that early feasibility process actually look like? And what are the first things you're evaluating to determine whether the project is a realistic candidate?
Yeah, we really look for deal breakers. So to give you an example, New England, unlike other parts of the country, municipalities and towns kind of control their own water supplies for the most part. So the first thing we want to know is, are we in an aquifer that's delivering water to people? And are we even allowed to drill? Because in some cases, people were very enthusiastic about geothermal. They were sitting in an aquifer. We looked into the local regulations, and it was a non-starter. They're not going to approve it, not going to allow it. So we look for deal breakers like that. Usually it's not the ground conditions that's a deal breaker. Even the thermal properties, although they vary, we can usually work with that. But it's more are there regulations, setbacks, for example, that are going to be difficult or impossible to meet for a project. And then looking at the size of the building, we can get an estimate of the loads, even if they don't have a mechanical engineer or an architect engaged, and get a sense for, do they have enough real estate available to drill enough holes to support it? So again, a lot of this can be done very early on in a desktop feasibility study without making a huge investment.
Makes sense. Nick, walk us through what a successful solar installation actually looks like from first conversation to finished project. What has to go right? What's the best sequence? What should happen first, second, third, so on. Maybe there's way too many steps, but
well, I can hit on the major steps. We've already when it comes to large scale ground mount solar, it's interconnection. So that is by far the largest cost driver of these projects. It can be On some of our largest project, I think the interconnection bill was $30 to $40 million. So you have to get it right. You can't. You will find that there is going to be a break point in terms of a megawatt sizing on a project like that, where, if you want to build a 25 megawatt project, the interconnection cost might be $20 million. But if you want to go to 30, it's going to be $55 million because you need to build a new substation because you just hit that point. So now it makes absolutely no sense to build 5 more megawatts at a cost of $35 million on interconnection. That is something you would like to know ideally way ahead of time so that you can begin to create your financing package. You go out to lenders, you go out to tax equity partners, knowing that we're going to do 25 megawatts and not 30 because at 30 it falls apart. So that's the biggest step. I would say the second biggest cost driver generally is permitting. So I almost considered amending my answer to the first question about who do you go to first, because there probably is an argument that your local, the host municipality may be the one to go to first. You're certainly going to want to check the zoning ordinances to see. And depending on, in this state, there's very few areas that are by right anymore for ground mount solar. So the best you're going to hope for is special use permits. So you're going to want to go to the planner and the town leadership and say, look, this is what we're looking to do. Here are the benefits. We know this can be a controversial land use at times. So what are your thoughts? And to sort of get the temperature of whether it's, yes, but we're going to have to discuss what it's going to look like, or get the door shut in your face. And before you start spending money, you're going to want to know what that is. So I think those are really the two biggest things, is understanding what you have, because if the interconnection's not right, and if the permitting's too difficult, you could talk about years. We have one project that's currently in development. I won't give many specifics, but it's been a 9-year permitting, and it's a by right project. So even when you think going into it, we have this locked down, it's not going to be that easy. So you're really going to want to know what you're getting yourself into, both interconnection as well as permitting. But those are the two biggest drivers of cost and time.
So you're not even designing the system or thinking about who's actually going to build it until you've answered those first two questions?
At Revity, we build our own systems. We have our own electrical outfit, union contractor, of course. So we know who's going to build it. It's going to be us. We do our own EPC. We do our own electrical with our friends at the IBEW, doing the actual work, to be clear. When it comes to design, we have a design group on our team, so they will certainly draw up rough designs of what the system is going to look like. But again, that's largely driven by what the utility company says, how big we can go. Obviously, the size of the parcel is big there too. So it's all interwoven into interconnection and permitting, right? Because you want to know how big you can go interconnection-wise, and you want to know how big you can go in terms of permitting. Is the town going to allow you to go build a 55 megawatt site?
And what about some of the programs that Rhode Island has? In other words, I'll say I'm also on the Resilience Energy Committee in Barrington, and we're doing a municipal solar project. And the developer said, hey, if we keep it under this level, we're going to get this rate in the REG program. If we go above it, it's probably not even worth it to go marginally above it.
In the REG program?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's certainly the case. Look, 3 years ago, the law changed about REG. It was previously projects were capped at 5 megawatts to participate. They increased that to 39 megawatts, which was great. The problem is the state agencies who are in charge of the REG program, when they release their annual list, they'll tell you, here's the ceiling rates for each size category, and here are the amount of megawatts that are allocated for the year. Well, we've had 3 years where you can go up to 39 megawatts, and we've yet to have a year where any megawatts have been allocated to the 15 to 39 megawatt group. So, and there are many reasons for that, but that's just the fact of the matter. So to your point, if you're going to build, you're going to want to know what your ceiling price that you're bidding into, because if you go too big, you might be in a different ceiling price. If you go too small, you might be in a different. Generally speaking, the smaller the project, the more remunerative REG is. So you're going to want to keep that in mind.
Okay, that makes sense. Andrew, talk to me about the workforce development pipeline. From the moment somebody kind of comes in to your program day one to actually working on one of these projects?
Yeah, well, we have no shortage of supply. I will tell you that. We run 3 training cycles per year of our core pre-apprenticeship program. 16 slots are available. Every time we open our doors, 280 people are there vying for one of those 16 slots. So there has to be a process by which we assess and hone in on the people who are ready to take advantage of the opportunity, address any barriers there may be pre-employment, because this industry is an unforgiving one. And we need to make sure that people are ready, willing, and able to succeed once they enter their apprenticeship. And we're not looking to produce apprentices. We're looking to produce journey workers. So the goal here is to ensure that we've done the preparation necessary to make sure that when a contractor, a responsible contractor like Revity, is investing in an apprenticeship training fund, their investment always pays the dividends of producing the journey worker at the end of the day. That's one of the value propositions we have for the various locals, and it's why we work with all of the locals of the Building Trades Council. But the supply is there. We have people who are hungry for work. We have a system in apprenticeship where IBEW's Joint Apprenticeship Training Committee is top notch. So many of our first year apprentices get their first chance to go out to employment on ground mount solar projects, right? Because there's cost savings and efficiencies that can be created while you're exposing people to great new ways to generate clean energy.
And what's just for somebody listening who is trying to figure out what to do with their life professionally, looking for a job, what's the timeline from walking through that door to being an apprentice to being a journeyman? Obviously, it varies based on how people do it.
It varies based on the individual and the trade that they select. There's about a 3-month assessment phase within our program that culminates in a 5-week hands-on training program called BF200 because it's 200 hours long, and we're super innovative with our names. But by doing that, we never want to assume, even if somebody walks in the door saying, I want to be an electrician. Okay. Did you know there are 16 different building trades and different subspecialties under them? So people can't really learn and explore what they want to do for the next 20 to 30 years if they haven't had a hand-on experiential learning with it. So for instance, many of our folks who are in renewable energy chose to do so by becoming a millwright and did not know what a millwright was before they walked through the door. So these types of hands-on contextualized learning environments are incredibly important to make sure people are ready, willing, and able to succeed in wherever their placement happens to be.
Yeah, we talked about it. I think that it's so valuable to attracting talent, but also give people a path to plus life.
Can I say a little bit on training also? Thanks. Yeah, we also partner with the Rhode Island Builders Association, REBA, on the residential side. So they have the residential construction workforce partnership. I believe it's a 16-week program to get people into the residential construction business. We have training programs for existing contractors on technologies, HVAC, a lot on heat pumps these days. And also we do energy code training. The state adopted the new International Energy Conservation Code 2024 a couple of years ago. So that's a lot to learn and for people to be up to speed on. So that's for the industry and for municipal building code officials.
It's a great program, and you're actually reminding me I owe John a call. Sorry, John, just in case. I'm calling
if you're
you
listening online, and I know you are. Okay, let's talk about something very important, like how do we pay for these projects? So maybe our John, there's a viable market, it seems like, in Massachusetts and Connecticut, largely because of school board authorities, right? So what needs to happen for Rhode Island to follow that path for geothermal to really take off here? Or let me say to sink in. I think that's better.
Right. So my understanding is Rhode Island's clean heat is targeting residential specific. It's not for commercial systems. So certainly that's helpful. But geothermal can be a hard sell, even with incentives on the residential market, just because it's capital intensive and it's fairly disruptive, right? If we're working on a construction site, that's one thing, but pulling a 60,000-pound drill rig into someone's backyard, and that's another thing altogether. So for that reason, air source heat pumps have been an easier fit, right? There's less capital up front. They are pretty efficient. They definitely reduce your fossil fuel consumption. So what's really driven the market in Massachusetts and elsewhere is having some incentives in place for commercial or institutional scale systems. So So for the Mass School Board Authority is one example. We've done a lot of work for K through 12 schools. They have not been our traditional market in geotechnical engineering. They're very cost sensitive, for one, but they have the money behind them to capitalize these geothermal systems. The other source of state funding has been the Division of Capital Assets Management and Maintenance, DCAM. So they've been funding some very large geothermal districts for state universities. And then beyond that, I mentioned in the last panel, most of our clients are higher ed and K through 12 schools. The higher ed has really been reliant on the federal tax incentives. One big beautiful bill, which thankfully kept geothermal from the IRA. So that can help fund upwards of 40 or 50% of the capital costs. And geothermal is very capital intensive, so people are definitely taking advantage of that. And not just in Massachusetts, all over the Northeast.
And
Brett?
we have had discussions with some of our large colleges and universities in the state who are investigating geothermal. And also, I know there is some potential legislation on network geothermal going through the works right now, too.
Nick, I wanted to ask, for installations that are on schools or serving municipalities, can you just run through some of the different ways they get funded and paid for?
Yes, we have not built a project on a school or a piece of town property, I don't think. But at bottom, I think most of these projects still participate in the net metering program.
Yep.
I think is the easiest. That's the cleanest program. If you have the requisite amount of load consumption, that is the cleanest program to slot yourself into because it makes the most. It's the easiest to understand, and that really is we call it behind the meter. Your generation is rolling your meter back, and then your consumption is rolling your meter forward, and then the utility company will come at the end of the month and read, are you net generation or net consumption? And if you've designed your system properly, you should be pretty close to even. Some months you may have a little bit to pay, some months you may have a little bit of credits that you get, and hopefully the credits you get will then offset the months that you have to pay, and it comes out in the wash. So that's what I would imagine most of these municipal sites that you see would do.
What about the virtual net metering for the minute? Like, for example, I believe many municipalities in Rhode Island subscribe,
Yeah.
right? And I think Revity has done some of those projects as
Correct.
well. Maybe just explain to people how that works and that'd be
Yeah.
great.
So virtual net, that's where we do most of our work is in virtual net metering, and we have 8 or 9 municipalities that are off takers. So virtual net metering, essentially what happens is, one of our sites will produce, say, 100 million kilowatt hours per year, and we will get net metering credits, just like your residential rooftop. The problem is, and a credit is essentially a gift card, a Rhode Island Energy gift card for 1 free kilowatt hour. And that's great, and that's what residential rooftops do, and that'll just offset their own usage. But the problem for us is we use nowhere near 100 million kilowatt hours in our modest office in Warwick. So what virtual net metering recognized when it got started was, okay, we still want you to build that. We understand you can't use it, so there's no reason to build it. But why don't you transfer those gift cards to a third party like a city that does use 50 million kilowatt hours a year? And they can take the gift card and redeem it to Rhode Island Energy. And, while you're at it, why don't you offer those cities and towns a discount on what they're paying on the gift card? And that's exactly what we do. So 1 kilowatt hour may give us a 20-cent gift card, and we will transfer that to a city or town. And we will, it's a competitive bidding process with other developers. So perhaps we offer, this is lower than we have offered to cities and towns, but just for round numbers sake, a 25% discount. So they will pay us 15 cents for the transfer of the 20-cent gift card. They will turn around and hand the gift card in, and they've saved themselves 5 cents on that kilowatt hour of electricity. And we have now monetized our kilowatt hour with that 15 cents. So that is the virtual net metering program in a nutshell. And, 25, these large institutions, saving 25% on their electricity. You're talking
Meaningful.
about significant 6 figures, and we have some hospitals that save over $1 million a year on their electricity bills.
And are they behind those projects when you're building them, or is it more that you build them and then people subscribe because you now have those kilowatt hours for sale?
So, right, good. And when you say behind, you mean financial?
Financially,
Yeah.
are they saying, "Hey, Revity, we want to help you build this project on the other side of the state, but we want to be a subscriber"? I imagine not.
No. So that's the other nice part about virtual net metering is they don't have to come up with any money. We do need to get our off-takers in line pretty early in the process because you're going to have a really hard time finding financing parties if you cannot show where your revenue model is coming from. So we do get on lining up off-takers very early on in the process. But the nice thing is we don't go to them and say, hey, we need $5 million from you right now. Right. You don't have to give us anything. Once our project is up and running, and once we're kicking out electricity to the grid, and once Rhode Island Energy is giving us those credits, we'll transfer them to you. And then once we do, in 30 days, you owe us 75% of the value of the credits. So no financial upfront for you.
But from just to sort of put it in layman's terms, or maybe a metaphor for people, it's like if you were a developer of a shopping plaza, you can get the loan once you have the tenants sign up. They don't put any money up front. You finance it through them, but going to the bank or going to the financing, knowing that you have the off-takers lined up.
Yes,
in the right. Exactly.
I would say it's very similar to that. Yep.
Great, thank you very much, Brett. A lot of projects seem to maybe die before they start because people assume they can't afford them. What funding incentives and tools are available that people should take more use of? Everything from efficiency, demand response, connected solutions, storage. I know there's a whole litany of programs. We'd love to kind of get a little bit of a rundown of what's out there.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't know if anyone was on our Show Me the Money panel this morning, but we dug into some of this. So yeah, we have incentives for, as I mentioned, both retrofit and new construction projects. So in a retrofit, we're looking to offset a lot of the cost of going to a more efficient unit that you're putting into an existing building. In a new construction, it's kind of seeing what the base case is and then incentivizing people to go above that base case with something more efficient. So definitely either case should be coming to us. And then we also have what we call OBR, on bill repayment. So it's a zero interest way to pay us back over a few years on your bill. So we get a lot of use out of that for projects that are moderate size. We can't get into multi-million dollars, but definitely several $100,000 up to a million or so for those types of projects. We do try to coordinate with the other state agencies for state and federal funding. So we work a lot with RID, the infrastructure bank, when they have funds available a couple of years ago for commercial projects. And then right now we're working with Commerce RI. They have a small business program where they're helping to supplement our incentives. So we definitely want to try to braid as much of that as possible. And yeah, you mentioned demand response, which I also wanted to get out here too. If people are familiar, we have a program called Connected Solutions where you can get paid for reducing your usage at peak times throughout the year. And so we have customers that will actually reduce their usage, turning down lighting or HVAC or maybe even process equipment. Other people have backup generation that they can turn on. And we are seeing a lot more interest in behind the meter battery storage right now. That's probably the biggest growing segment that we get interested in. And I think the Connected Solutions program could be a big part of the financial investment for batteries right now.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up batteries. That was my follow-up question. So just to say, I mean, what do you think is the scale of the opportunity in Rhode Island, and what's the biggest challenge to the widespread deployment of batteries?
Yeah, good question. And I break it up. There's kind of the front of the meter grid scale batteries and then more customer sided, right? And so we are in the final stages. There was a big PUC docket going on to develop a wholesale tariff for like grid scale in front of the meter battery storage. So I think that'll really open things up on that side. And then behind the meter, yeah, we actually have over 1,000 residential customers in our Connected Solutions program with batteries, which people may be surprised by. I think that there's over 1,000 residents of Rhode Island that have batteries. It seems pretty big, and it's definitely growing still, and the Connected Solutions program is a big part of the economics of that. And then, as I mentioned, we do have more C&I scale, small and large scale coming online. Then obviously beyond that, there's the development of long duration storage, right? That's a separate thing, and being able to balance out things like the wind and solar. So that would be a little longer term, I'd say.
And is there any, I know there was just a large rollout of smart meters. I don't want you to give away anything you're not supposed to talk about, but what are the prospects for time of use coming out for residents, and what does that portend for behind the meter storage?
Sure, and I probably have to be a little careful as to what is the official company stance. We are in the middle of our rate case right now. We submitted our rate case, and hearings are coming up, and this is definitely a big topic of discussion. So I know it wasn't in our initial proposal, but it is part of, I think, some discussions now, and some of the testimony going back and forth, time of use rates, and people have asked about heat pump rates as well, or other things, whether it's storage or EV types of rates. So again, I don't want to get too far ahead. We are excited about the meters. Hopefully people here have started to get their smart meters, depending on where you live. We started in the south of the state, and we're making our way north right now. We're in the Providence area, so we should be done later this year. And we do have we're working with a company called Sense, which is built into the meter that can disaggregate the load, so you can see what the different end uses are, and it can see electric vehicles and solar and storage and that type of thing. So we are excited about giving people that opportunity to be able to see their data, and hopefully that'll lead to more action.
I've got mine, thank you.
How often do you look at it?
Not enough is the answer. Andrew, all this depends on having people who can actually build and maintain and expand these systems. So you were saying, that there's a lot of people entering the pipeline right now. Maybe just talk a little bit, and you mentioned some of this, so I don't want you to repeat yourself, but what does a registered apprenticeship provide that other pathways often don't?
Well, I mean, the key point is earn while you learn. Many people can't afford to run the risk of incurring debt to receive a degree and then hope to get a job at the end of it. Many people need to earn and learn at the same time. And more, we are linking new apprenticeship programs we're developing with college credit and degrees anyway, right? So it's a more economical way especially if we're trying to reach and expand opportunity to folks who are experiencing poverty. It's absolutely necessary. So, the pipeline is extremely good. Registered apprenticeship has a lot of value to offer. And if you don't mind, couple comments, because it sounds like there's some really smart financial programs that I need to get smarter on myself. 2 frustrations. We run a graduate service learning program where our graduates who, while they're waiting for placement, can receive advanced training. We built 5 passively designed net zero homes. There is for low-income families. There's no way that would have been possible if we weren't subsidizing the labor costs by running it through a training program. And similarly, when 2010 we launched the Emerald Cities Providence Initiative, we were trying to get to deep energy retrofits. But the problem was energy service companies at the time were changing the light bulbs, taking the payback within 7-year period, and not doing the deeper work necessary to get to the building envelope as a whole. And it sounds like there's tools that I've fallen behind on that can start to address that. And that's super exciting, because when you link the financing with registered apprenticeship utilization, you have a win-win. Not only are you doing more depth within the project, but you're expanding the availability of trade opportunities, because the glazers are the ones who have the AGMT certification to put on the building envelope to make sure it's conserving the energy that you're generating, hopefully from a clean source, and using well within your building.
That makes a lot of sense, and everyone, should understand that the best practice is to do the efficiency work before you get solar for your residents and probably for your commercial building as well. You can applaud. It's okay. Got so much applause so far. Nick, from where you sit in the private sector, how have the economics and market conditions changed over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and what still needs to improve to accelerate deployment in Rhode Island?
Oh, well, I've only been doing this for 5 years, so I can't speak to 10.
Keep it at 5.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the changes you see across real estate development certainly apply to solar. Land costs, interest rates, solar's not immune to any of that. I think permitting has got more expensive. I think that interconnection fluctuates. I think here in Rhode Island, the labor standards work that has been done legislatively, in our experience, hasn't really changed much in terms of the cost, because we, by and large, were using union labor to begin with. I think in this state, you're very hard pressed to do a major construction project by trying to piece together a non-union workforce. So, when labor standards in renewable energy passed in 2022, somewhere around there, we were in support of it. And we had some developers, I'm not going to name any names, but like, why do you guys support it? It's like, we're using the union shops anyway. Well, it's not, let's just put it in the law. And so that really, I don't think that's driven costs too much. Obviously, HR1, OB3, I mean, the federal tax incentives remain a cornerstone of this entire market. So pulling them out is, a shot, right? It's a huge problem. And, I push back against when people criticize and say, well, if solar's so great, why do you need the tax incentives? And if wind's so great, why do you need the tax incentives? And, I say, have you ever done any reading about what type of tax incentives our oil and natural gas industry have received over the last 60 years?
All of them.
Yeah. They can write off losses, fully write off losses when they hit a dry well. And it's a recognition of how important energy is, whatever type of energy you have. And it's a recognition that these energy projects will fail. And so if there's not favorable tax treatment for them on the federal level, people won't do it and we won't have energy. So I don't even begrudge the fossil fuel companies their decades of tax incentives. What I begrudge is people saying, oh, well, solar and wind, they need their tax incentives because they don't work otherwise.
Even playing field.
Exactly. So, it's different types of tax incentives, but the federal government has to recognize that we need more energy, whatever the source is. And so the tax incentives are those programs. So certainly we're hopeful that we have a group in Washington that remembers that it should go both ways.
I think we have a good delegation here from Rhode Island.
Of course, I was not talking about that.
No, I know. Brett, what are you seeing right now in how customers think about energy? Are more of them looking beyond efficiency alone towards storage, load flexibility, resilience? Are customers starting to think less about a single technology and managing the whole building? What are you seeing, especially from your perch?
Yeah, definitely. It is the whole picture, and obviously, affordability is the word of the day. However, you can address that, so there's no one single solution to that or one single blame point, right? So it's all the above, as people like to say. And yeah, I think we try to help customers look at it holistically. We probably can do a better job of it ourselves as well, within the silos of the utility and some of the regulatory silos, right? Because it's not always easy to cross streams in different programs, but ideally from a customer standpoint, you can make it as simple for them, and because at the end of the day, they don't necessarily care where it's coming from. They want to know what their bill is, and that's going to be reliable, whatever it is, and certainly environmental benefits as well. So some customers might be solar, some might be storage, some efficiency. So just trying to find what works best for each case.
Thank you. And Andrew, to go back to you, what are the bottlenecks? What are the improvements that could be made? It sounds like you have a fantastic program that has a real track record of accomplishment, but everything can always be a little bit better. What would improve it even just a little bit?
Well, what would improve it is changing the demand side of the equation, right? Because right now it's one of those funny dynamics where the market's never going to correct itself in terms of the workforce imbalance. A contractor, oddly enough, sometimes has a slight disincentive for employing a brand new first-year apprentice. So they're not doing it at the appropriate rate to replenish the workforce going forward. But when we require, say, apprenticeship utilization tied to financing or tied to a project standard or tied to labor standards, what we do is we create the opportunity where all contractors are competing on equal playing ground, but we've increased the number of entry points there are for community residents to gain a good career. Because unfortunately, the only age demographic that continues to increase in Rhode Island is 55 plus. 18 to 34-year-old share of the workers continues to decline. The reason is the bottleneck of the lack of training opportunities through apprenticeship and contractors need the equal playing field in order to expand that opportunity.
That makes a lot of sense. And definitely our demography, what do they say? Demography is destiny. We need to create those opportunities. Okay, this is going to be the last round of questions. Here we go. We'll start at the end with you, John. And then we'll just go this way. If someone in this room wants to move a project in the next 12 months, what's the one thing they should do first and the one mistake they should avoid?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier with geothermal, we definitely advocate desktop study, right? There's a lot you can glean from. There's been so much work done in New England. We have good data on thermal properties of the ground, so we can do a preliminary design with confidence without making that investment of pilot testing. But at some point, to support the design, you have to do pilot testing. That's typically the second phase. And then you transition into schematic design, design development, and construction documents. The one thing we see in schools that I would caution people against is with respect to operating heating and cooling, they want to keep it simple. So what does that mean from a geothermal standpoint? Well, we want geothermal to cover 100% of our heating and cooling. But what happens in a typical heating and cooling load profile is you can have some very extreme peak conditions, big demand on the heating and cooling system that only last 2, 3, 4 hours out of an entire year. So from a sizing standpoint, it just doesn't make sense to drill another 10 or 20 boreholes at maybe $1 million, $500,000 to $1 million to cover a load condition that the building is only going to see for a few hours out of the year. So schools, generally speaking, need to commit to more complicated systems, hybrid systems that engage some backup source, and it could be a gas-fired boiler, it could be an electric boiler, electric centrifugal chiller, to cover those short-term peak load conditions so you're not paying an exorbitant amount of money up front drilling to cover those short-term conditions.
Thank you. Nick?
Same question.
Same question to all four of you. So you guys have a lot of time to come up with amazing answers. Go ahead.
So I'm going to talk about the most common mistake when it comes to rooftop, because I don't want to give away too many ground mount secrets here. No, but when it comes to rooftop, the sizing of your system is crucial. You need to really understand how the net metering credit program, if that's what you're going to do, works, and how the credits are calculated and what your historic use is. Because if you are generating more than 125% of your actual use, the value of the credits goes through the floor. And I have seen owners really lose the economic benefit of what they thought they were doing because their excess credits were they built too big of a system, and they are getting their excess credits are just eating into the value of what they thought they were doing. So it really is just so important to understand what your actual consumption historically has been, and more importantly, how Rhode Island Energy calculates it. A lot of people make the mistake that they think it's kilowatt hour to kilowatt hour is what you want to do with net metering. What you really want to do is how much am I spending on my monthly bill or my annual bill, and how big of a system do I need to build to generate the financial value to match that spend. Because if you just go kilowatt to kilowatt, that's where a lot of people get into trouble. And early on, the virtual net metering world is similar. Early on, we ran into that issue with off-takers saying, hey, we need exactly the amount of kilowatt hours and credits that we use. And we try to say it's not about the kilowatt, it's about the spend. What's the value of the credit versus what's the value? You want to be buying money, you're not buying kilowatt hours from us, and it's complicated. So I understood people were like, no, that's not right. So it's all about sizing. You really, sizing plays an interconnection too. So you really just need to understand how big of a system should I build? How big of a system can I build? So you really got to understand that.
I think that's definitely critical. And one thing I'd add, and certainly it's true in the residential and small commercial, is don't build it and then start adding all this other electric load, thinking, because now you've missized it, right? So you got to get that. Am I going to have EVs and charging? I know for Resi, you need to actually have the bill of sale for the EV in order to get the bump in how much net metering you can have.
Yeah, I think they changed that last year, though. Didn't they get rid
raised
of the 120?
They raised the cap up, but you still can add more based on if you have electric vehicle. And I think sometimes people stack it up like, okay, I'm going to get a heat pump later, but you kind of want to have the efficiency done first, have the heat pump, and then say, this is my load that I want to offset.
Yeah, so last year they got rid of, I believe the legislature got rid of that 125% limit for residential solar. I know that was a couple of years coming. And I thought that was a good legislative change. But I will say, in the back of my head, I was a little concerned about homeowners really blowing out their system 200% of last year's,
Right.
And at least in the first few years, looking at their credits and say, oh my God, I'm getting hammered here with the excess net metering charges. Or I'm not getting the full value of what I thought I was going to get. So there was a value in the governor there being the governor being in the law saying, no, you can't even build bigger than that. But certainly there's value in overbuilding when your intent is to do the EV, to do the battery, to do all this electrification. So I think ultimately it was a good legislative change, but people do need to give real thought to sizing.
Absolutely. Andrew?
Well, a mistake to avoid, especially on large-scale complex projects, involve labor early. You have to. When I hear geothermal, I think of my friends over at the United Association of Plumber and Pipe Fitters, Local 51, the highly skilled labor that is necessary. There's the pile drivers involved. There's the laborers that are involved. When I think offshore, I think about the millwrights. I think about the iron workers, the carpenters, all the ropes access technicians that are necessary. Think about solar. There's all of the electricians involved. They have to be involved early because not on every project, but vast majority of large-scale and complex projects, these are the cost driver of labor is huge, and we have to ensure there's the adequate supply. And I will point out that many union contractors, all of them, are signatory by choice because it makes sense for their business model. If I need 20 highly skilled electricians who have the EVITP certification tomorrow, who else am I going to call? So you have to make sure you're involving labor in the conversations early to map out and plan for your project needs. But also, if there's a municipal aspect or a regulatory or permitting process, what better way to ensure access to great careers for local residents, but by including registered apprenticeship within the project standards?
That makes a ton of sense. Brett, how would you answer this question, especially in regard to efficiency?
Yep, thanks. I'll agree. Call us early. Don't wait till the end because we don't just have incentives for the actual project, but we also can help with when you're in the technical analysis phase, right? We can help with financially with technical assistance as well as bringing on experts that we have contracts with. So earlier the better. And I read the Projo online every day, and pretty much every day has 1 to 2 articles about new developments, whether it's residential or multifamily or commercial. And I always send them on to my team to see, are we involved in this one? Are we involved in that one? Most of the time we are, but once in a while I'll find one that we're not. So don't make me find you that you haven't contacted us.
You heard it here. Don't make Brett find you. I think we have a couple minutes to take questions. Anyone have a question? Or is that yes, please.
Yes, the junction has been active. Down White project. So you're talking about you're at the Cal that and point out that so that doesn't you're in the set by so it's Texas they have subdivided do you which what slay here. Did we see that act here and at connected and it's just say that to get bring it up to oh so that the ground that it's power instead what that thing that's something we could do just to help speed up the transition and that be was also at the time downtown. And
And net metering is the primary driver.
you're in fact
Yeah.
been used on in fact since then. Speed. Then we it's the third time.
Well, I'm sure that Nick would look with envy on the permitting process in a Texas municipality. So,
Yes.
Nick, I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, no, it's true. So I do know about net metering 3.0 in California, and I guess I hadn't given it much thought, so I appreciate the question. The problem with designing solar projects with on-site load in mind, and specifically new on-site load, is you are not going to advance the renewable energy standard with that project or the Act on Climate, because those equations are they're very complicated laws, but the equations are pretty simple. You have the numerator, which is renewable energy development, and then you have the denominator, which is existing load in the state, right? And you're trying to get that numerator up to match the percentages in the law. So when you bring in-state load, new load, into the state, you are reducing the state's compliance with Act on Climate, which, is good. We should bring in more manufacturing, but you have to recognize that. So the only issue I would have, just thinking about it off the top of my head, is when you're matching on-site load with on-site DG generation, that project is now really not contributing to the Act on Climate because it is not offsetting the load that exists elsewhere. So that's the benefit of a large DG system that is not connected to a large load customer. But I agree with you that it would make interconnection easier, because then you don't really need to utilize the local distribution lines, and we don't have to bother Rhode Island Energy as much about what the substations can handle, because it's just using the generation that sits right there. Ultimately, I think where we see the biggest stops in the interconnection process, it's really two places. It's the impact study phase, and then this has nothing to do with Rhode Island Energy, is what's called the Affected System Operator Study, the ASO study, which is done by the RTO, the Regional Transmission Organization. That's not outside of their hands. My understanding from both of those systems is that the problem is they are studying a bunch of projects at the same time together and trying to understand what all those projects are going to do and what they need under the existing infrastructure assumptions. The issue there is once a project drops out, they got to start again, because they were assuming 175 megawatts, and then 25 drops out, and it's like, oh, well, now we got to study 150. It strikes me that there must be a better way to do it. That said, I have no idea what that way is. So,
Australia, so they did large scale studies. Fine. What is it? That we should donate.
well, there you go, Brett. Let's do the Australian model.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that, but that sounds wise.
Yeah, this is definitely not my area of expertise, and I'm not speaking for the company, but I know in general there are things that you look at, like flexible interconnection, and we do have our system data portal. I don't know if you've seen that. It sounds like not the Australia, but you can find it online. It's a map that shows the entire grid and where there are constraints and where there's headroom. So people do have the ability to kind of look at that to see where it might be easier or harder.
It's a version saw.
Yep.
And I would just add, I've been learning more and more about data centers using AI on the energy load to become dispatchable power sources. And I think that you could imagine that might change the economics along interconnection, right? Because they basically would become a producer into a system with behind the meter power that they could sell by sort of, right? Because they don't need that power on one uniform that goes up and down and you could control it. I think that's coming, right? Everything is going to be optimized using AI to be the most efficient. So had to get AI in before the end of a panel. So rule in 2026, must
Great.
mention AI. Just did it at the end so we could comply with the rules. Any other questions before we close? All right. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you. Let's give them a hand. All right. Thank you.
Now we can drink.